Okay, everybody is here, right? So, thank you, folks, for coming. For Karthik Valmeekam's defense, he'll be defending his PhD dissertation title on the role of large language models in planning. His dissertation committee consists of Professor Juan Lu, Professor Siddharth Srivastava, Professor Sharat Sridharan, and of course, Professor Tam Dietrich, with me chairing the committee. Special thanks to Tom, who came all the way from Oregon, bringing the rainy weather with him, and Juan, who is making a special unscheduled stop in Tempe in the midst of his globetrotting just for this. And subject to his successful defense today, Karthik plans to go back to raking it hand over fist at Amazon AGI. The NVIDIA results are out, and AI bubble is still going to be there for another 2-3 weeks. So you're fine. You're making a lot of money. Okay. Where he actually started working, Amazon AGI, where he started working this semester. So before starting the formal proceedings, I generally tend to say a few things about the students. So I'd like to say a few things about Karthik, Sojourn at ASU. But since we are in the era of AI, it's so painful to write a review of an entire journey of a student. Like any self-respecting iClear reviewer, I asked ChatGPT. I need to make some human interest remarks about Karthik Valmeekam at his ASU defense. Can you please do the needful and write a page or two for me to read? And ChatGPT readily gave me this full page, and it starts beautifully saying, it's both an honor and a pleasure to speak today about someone who has not only been an exceptional scholar, blah, 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 actually much better written than mine. It's in actual English as against I-English, which is what I speak. But anyway, you will get to hear my version. Karthik joined our lab back in 2019 after apparently being hypnotized by the Intro to AI course that he took with me. He did an MS thesis on explainable human-AI interaction, specifically working on the radar human-aware planning system that was presented both at III and ICAPS. It's one of my great regrets that I missed the deadline to nominate his MS thesis for an outstanding MS thesis award that he would have been a shoo-in for. Sorry, Karthik. Anyways, Karthik decided to stay on and do his PhD here starting 2021 fall. And it's that work he's going to defend here today. Karthik started his work right around the time the hoopla about LLMs was taking off, and it was getting fashionable to write LLMs are zero-shot XXX papers by the dozen. One stream of those papers was the LLMs are zero-shot planners variety. As much as we were impressed by LLMs being such a good vibe machines, we had significant doubts that they can do system 2 level tasks like planning, and decided to look into this critically. And Karthik drawn into this direction and wound up playing the lead on the work that we have done in the last 3 years, or 4 years, I believe, and did a series of pretty significant stress tests on LLMs planning abilities, starting with the standard LLMs used alone, or modulo external verifiers, and moving on to LRMs, or large reasoning models, that came along last year. When the community realized, I guess, partly thanks to his work, that LLMs can't actually plan despite all the papers about LLMs being zero-shot planners. If they can, then you don't need another LRMs, for example. So if LLMs can plan a hit list, I'm pretty sure Karthik will be prominent on it. I hope there won't be any Anthropic-style denial of service attacks orchestrated by LLMs during this defense. In addition to original research, Karthik has also been involved in perspective pieces and tutorials that have been well received. From an advisor's perspective, a PhD student is successful in as much as he or she gives the advisor many opportunities to flaunt their work to the world. On this part, Karthik certainly succeeded, as I seem to have given so many dissertation talks of yours, in other places myself. So that's great. The series of papers that Karthik has been involved in have been presented at all the premier venues, NeurIPS, iClear, ICML, DMLR, etc., and have received quite a bit of attention. He currently has a rather unbelievable 2,632 citations and an H index of 17, a number that is certainly competitive with associate professors and certainly dwarfs most PhD students, especially considering that these were scientifically skeptical studies of LLMs that he was writing about. I will let him tell you all about his work in the defense. I should also mention that Karthik got a PhD fellowship from IBM for his work. In person, Karthik is a very unassuming and approachable person, something he could hardly have learned from his advisor. He collaborated with multiple students in the group as a junior, peer, and senior collaborator over the years. And the fact that so many people seem to like working with him says something about his personality to me. As I said, Karthik's entry into the lab was him apparently being smitten with the Intro to AI class, and I'm glad to report to you that he went on to be an amazing TA organizers for both that course and other courses that I have taught. Karthik has long since actually entered that gray zone between advisee and a colleague quite a while back. I've pretty much depended on Karthik and his counsel for so many things over the past several years. One of those, as it happens, is having Karthik record videos of the various talks that the group or I give, including mine, so we could post them for wider consumption. In one case, actually, he was able to seamlessly dub the cell phone audio to replace the slightly grating original audio track. Karthik was pretty darn good at this kind of stuff, and I assume that the current crop of PhD students are probably just good at doing these kinds of things. I only found later that Karthik has considerable interests and talents in movie making, and that he writes screenplays and other creative fiction on the side. There's even a rumor that he spends nights working with a crew of movie maker friends in India to develop movies in Telugu, a language that I and he happen to speak. I don't know if this is true, but it certainly explains the fact that I could never get him to come to the lab before noon. Not surprisingly, he's also into photography and would lug his SLR and take some of the best pictures of the lab denizens on our occasional fall color hikes. This particular factoid could come in handy if you ever go to his webpage and notice that he says telling stories about AI at ASU. So when in his thesis, he acknowledged his recent close collaborator, Kaya, for their shared love of creative fiction, I was a little worried and I had to go back and read those papers just to see how much of them LLM generated, to tell you the truth. I'm told that he's a great cook and that he had treated all the lab denizens to dosas made from scratch at his apartment. I would like to believe that this too is creative fiction because I've never been up with these doses. Okay, it's been quite an honor and a privilege to see Karthik over the last 6 years of graduate study in ASU, 4 years being the PhD, as he went from a student to junior researcher to a peer collaborator. If only one who gets paid poorly and also converts dreams into code. I wish him luck at his defense and the journey beyond. So now, take it away.
Yes. Thank you very much, Professor Rao, for those wonderful words. You also gave part of the intro for my dissertation as well. So thank you for that. So today I'll be talking about the work that I've done in the past few years, titled On the Role of Large Language Models in Planning. As we know, LLMs are everywhere. These are the first case of a broadly knowledgeable system where you can ask anything and get completions for those questions. And these are currently being trusted and deployed in many places, including chatbots, search engines, recommendations for coding and things like that. And given that you can ask any question and these models seem to be answering these questions because they look at everything as a prompt to be completed, there has been significant interest in trying to understand what kind of abilities these models have. And particularly, we are interested in the claims about their emerging planning capabilities, And there have been a bunch of papers claiming that LLM, as Professor Rao said, LLMs are zero-shot XXX, LLMs are zero-shot planners, reasoners, and so on. Uh, and also that there might be sparks of AGI, these models. But there's little a priori reason to believe that these models can reason or plan, because these are giant, like reflexive system one type systems that that have the knowledge of the entire web, and are mostly trying to approximately retrieve based on the prompt that is given to them. But there is still there are still works that claim that LLMs can reason or plan, and the possible reasons could be that uh, uh, given that the training corpus is like the entire web, and it is being able to approximately retrieve from this web, memory sort of reduces the need to reason, and uh, uh, along with the web corpus having base facts. Firstly, we don't really know what exactly the entire web contains. It could contain both the base facts and the detective closure facts, and retrieval of the later can be mistaken for reasoning. So what I want to do with this, like what I did in this dissertation, is to sort of systematically test whether these models can help in planning. So in this dissertation, we have three parts. The first part caters to systematically evaluating the LLM planning abilities in autonomous modes, including the effect of certain prompt engineering techniques, using them within self-verification loops. And spoiler alert, we do find that they don't perform that well. And even though they cannot come up with plans that are like executable and goal reaching, they can still be leveraged for idea generations and can be used to support planning in various constructive roles. They can be used as heuristics, like as essentially as candidate generators which can either be part of to external planners, or they can be accompanied with external verifiers in a loop. And along with being candidate solution generators, they can also play a role in approximate, like getting up domain knowledge. Essentially, like they can come up with a human in the loop involved. They can help in coming up with models that can be used either with external planners or within the LLM modular framework itself. And they can also be used as format changers or specification elaborators. So the second part essentially covers what how we can leverage LLMs to support planning through the LLM modular frameworks. And the third part, which is the most exciting part for me, is that there's a new class of LLMs which are post-trained to output intermediate tokens before the solution. Essentially, LLMs, when provided with a planning problem, they directly start providing the solution. These new class of models, essentially, LLMs are post-trained to output certain intermediate tokens that are before producing the solution. And this has these new class of models have shown to perform impressively across many benchmarks. So we wanted to first test how these models, new class of models, perform. And we find that they are much better than vanilla LLMs. But why? But it's not entirely clear uh, uh, why. Like, what is the reason for this performance improvement? And there are some attributions. There are some works that attribute this performance improvements to the model reasoning through the problem, or having certain reasoning behaviors within the intermediate tokens that are meaningful to the end user. So we want to sort of uh, uh, ask the question as to whether these are really reasoning traces, and also if the correctness of these traces matter for them. So that's what we will cover in the third part. So coming back to the question of can LLMs autonomously plan, we essentially what we did was to uh, uh, like we looked at a specific like classical planning problem where there is a domain model which contains the actions that can be done, when the actions can be done, and what happens if the actions are done. And there is a initial state and a goal state, and the problem essentially is to find a sequence of actions that will take you from the start state to the goal state. And we generate prompts for such kind of problems and present it to the LLMs, and then evaluate the outputs of the LLMs. So the domains that we look at within these class of problems, the most at least famous one is blocks world, where there are a bunch of blocks and you have to basically stack them from an initial configuration to a goal configuration. There is also this other domain called logistics, where you have to move a bunch of crates between cities, and along with these are more common sense planning domains, and along with these domains we also have obfuscations of these domains where we essentially replace the action names with either like a random alphanumeric or a completely different English word, which do not have any meaning associated with the dynamics of the problem. So this is how an example plan generation prompt will look like. There is the domain information. We also provide an example, and then there is the query instance, and there is the GPT-4 response. And this is essentially in natural language. So we find that models, the GPT class of models, they're not very effective in plan generation. And in the common sense domains, both blocks world and logistics, they are basically the best accuracy is less than 40% for blocks world. Now, as I said before, in order to test whether these models, even this 40%, if that is because of the model actually being able to plan, or is it because of it approximately retrieving from its training data, we have the obfuscated domains, where we essentially have the mystery blocks world domain, where we replace the action names and the restrictions to mean something completely different from an English perspective. But for a classical planner, they're identical domains. And we find that there is a pretty huge dip from 34% to 2%. Note that these are the same instances, and like a classical planner would get 100% on both of them, and they're identical domains. So we sort of see that for the GPT class of models, that the accuracy takes a huge dip. And I've been testing as more and more models came out. I've been testing them on both Bloxworld and Mystery Bloxworld to see if this trend has changed with other LLMs after GPT-4. And it turns out that it's pretty much the same. The accuracies for Bloxworld have increased quite a bit, but with the Mystery Bloxworld, they take the same, like a huge dip. And the best accuracy is around 4%. So why is this the case? The If you look at it, planning contains essentially two phases. One is essentially getting the planning knowledge, getting the actions, the preconditions, the effects, and then the second part is the interaction resolution, where you have to do search to come up with the right sequence of actions. So, and given that LLMs are these LLMs do approximate retrieval, they are probably much better off in the first phase, and they're pretty bad with interaction resolution.
Quick question.
Yes.
Why are the one-shot numbers lower than the zero-shot?
So it could be that the one-shot numbers that we are the examples that we are providing, it could be that it's steering more towards that example, which is probably biasing towards the wrong answer. So, and because it could also be that the kind of examples that you're providing will also affect these scores. So to sort of test whether removing that interaction resolution part, if that will help the LLMs better, we also we did relaxed evaluations where we essentially ignore. We have two types of relaxations. One where we ignore the delete conditions of all the actions. This essentially means that no action will it'll negate any effect. And then there's a precondition relaxation where an action can be executed from any state. And we found that when we evaluate the plans with delete and precondition relaxations, they perform much better than the non-relaxed version. So this sort of gives us an insight into how that LLMs are bad at the interaction resolution part. And we've also essentially most of the existing works, they have the kind of domains that they check do not have or do not require such interaction resolution, and hence they find LLMs to perform much better. So we introduced a benchmark that tests this interaction resolution phase in a variety of tasks involving planning. And that is Plan Bench. It consists of a whole bunch of tasks where the first two correspond to end-to-end plan generation, and the others are sort of simpler auxiliary tasks. And there's also a GitHub repo which currently has 429 stars and 46 votes, and people are using it. So this overall, we find that LLMs are pretty bad at planning, but there is also there's also a slew of prompt engineering techniques that came about, saying that you have to prompt the LLM the right way to get the right answer. And one of those one of the most popular of such techniques was chain of thought prompting. So this has been popular among the LLM aficionados. There is essentially no clear definition of chain of thought, other than the idea to just give LLMs like examples showcasing how to go about the problem, and essentially that would help it learn that procedure and solve uh, other problems from the same class. So uh, to provide such knowledge, there are also two things that we have to consider. Basically, like how general this knowledge can be. It can be something like just think step by step, take a deep breath, or such kind of magic incantations, or it could be something very specific to the problem, where you explain every single step of the problem and hope that the LLM would then learn that procedure and generalize to other instances. And the more general the knowledge, the easier for it is for humans to provide it. And but it's also higher for the like it's more difficult for the LLMs to operationalize that advice. So in order to test this systematically, what we did is we came up with multiple setups with increasing specializations for a chain of thought. The first setup is the most general one, which is just think step by step. The second one is where the second one is domain independent chain of thought, where we just provide essentially the information about which state, the current state, the action that is taken, the resulting state, and why that action is applicable within that state. So it's essentially like information about why that plan actually why that plan is successful, right? So and then the third setup is a little bit more specific, domain specific. In our case, we again go back to our lovely blocks world, where we essentially teach the heuristic of putting all the blocks on the table and then construct the goal stack. So in this setup, our goals are all single stack goals, and we have a fourth setup where we specialize three by ensuring that all blocks are on the table to begin with, and the fifth one is even more specialized, where the goal stack is always in lexicographic stack order. And the way we test it is we provide we provide this information for like 3 block and 4 block problems, and we tested from 3 to 20 block problems. And we essentially find that as we increase the number of blocks, the accuracy dips. So this sort of tells us that chain of thought doesn't really help LLMs generalize to higher number of blocks. And we also tested whether chain of thought works on some of the domains that were used to claim that chain of thought actually works. One of which is last letter concatenation. So you have a bunch of words, and you just have to take the last letters of each word and concatenate them. And in the paper, they have only looked at from like 2 to 6 words, and which performed pretty well. And they thought that chain of thought will generalize further. But if you actually increase the number of words till 20, you see a dip. So this sort of tells us that COT doesn't enable LLMs to learn procedures. And along with testing a chain of thought prompting, we also there were another set of works that essentially talked about how verification is easier than generation, and so we can ask the LLM to verify the solutions and then have them in self-critiquing loops, and we can and then improve performance. So we also tested whether LLMs can self-critique, and in this case, we essentially looked at, along with planning, we also looked at two other domains, two other like formal reasoning domains, where we could for which formal notions of correctness exist. And what we have is essentially like an LLM plus LLM system where the LLM generates the candidate solutions, and it proposes the candidate solutions, and if the LLM the verifying LLM will back prompt if the solution is incorrect, and we have a feedback, like we have a limit of 15 rounds, and if that feedback limit is exceeded, or if the verifying LLM thinks it's correct, the we essentially get that as the outcome. So what we find here is pretty interesting, because we find that when the LLM is augmented with the within the self-critique loop, for most of the domains, the performance actually worsens or decreases from the baseline. And as the number of back prompts increase, the self-correction essentially degrades the output quality. So if the LLMs were like good verifiers, then it would have recognized it would have verified the instances correctly, and this degradation wouldn't have happened. Right? So we also found that the LLM as a verifier maintains significant false negative rates. So it essentially labels valid solutions to be invalid, and so the LLM tries again. It keeps going on. So we also like to compare the LLM plus LLM system. We also had another baseline where we sample where we have a LLM plus a sound critique that essentially LLM accompanied with an external verifier that that loops till the sound critique say deems the solution valid, and we find that performs significantly better than the standard prompting baseline and the LLM plus LLM baseline. So we'll come back to this again in the second part. But even with this self-critiquing work, we find that there are contradicting claims. Like we find self-critiquing to worsen the performance, while there are works that claim that self-critiquing works. But and that could be because of two main reasons. One is it's harder to sort of establish the quality of the LLM critiques in like tacit knowledge tasks, but for these tasks where there exist formal notions of correctness, we can evaluate the verification and the critique. And given that these models are perform approximate retrieval, approximate retrieval on like corrections data can give us like a mirage that these models are actually these models are able to self-verify. So as we have seen in the autonomous modes, the LLMs by themselves with chain of thought prompting or in self-critiquing groups, they're pretty bad in coming up with plans. But all is not lost. We can use these LLMs to come up with ideas, and then we can have these LLMs interact with external planners or verifiers and use these LLMs to support planning. So that brings us to the second part of the dissertation, where we're trying to leverage LLMs to support planning through various roles. The first the first role that we are going to talk about is LLMs as idea generators for external planners. So what we did is we took a local search planner like LPG, which starts off from a seed plan and makes changes to it till it reaches the correct solution. And what we tested was we tested with like an empty seed plan, a random seed plan, and an LLM generated seed. So you can think of the LLM generated plan as a heuristic to this planner. And we find that the average search steps with an LLM seed plan performs like much better than the random seed plan and the empty seed plan for the common sense domains. So we can overall what this says is we can use LLMs as heuristics to these external planners. But even more interestingly, we can also have LLMs interact with external verifiers and sort of have an interaction loop between them. And this and along with being idea generators, we can have like a bigger framework where LLMs can be playing multiple roles. So we introduced essentially the LLM modular framework where LLMs.
Just quick question,
Yes.
on the previous slide.
Yeah.
In the mystery, was this the obfuscated? Sorry, was this the random one or the
Oh yeah, the this one was the deceptive one.
deceptive one?
Deceptive.
Because it looks like for those domains it doesn't have the
Yeah.
NLP plan.
Yeah, the LLMC plan is better than the random, but
Makes it worse than
yeah,
the MD.
worse than that.
So do you know if in the deceptive one, so this is the deceptive one, right?
This is deceptive.
In the random one, do you have the same?
No, but I'm assuming that it would sort of be similar, given that
So
the seed plans themselves are not.
so it's still relying on the semantics of the variables.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, within the LLM modular framework, we have the LLMs provide like candidate plans, and we have a whole bunch of like we can have a whole bunch of critiques, like binary critiques, constructive critiques, and style critiques that will assess the plan. And if the critiques agree and sign off on it, that can that would essentially be a valid solution, and that can be used or stored for later, like fine tuning purposes. We'll come back to this again. And if the critics disagree, there can be a way to, based on what critics disagree and like what elements of the plan are wrong, there can be like a meta controller that decides how to again like back prompt the LLM and move the interaction loop forward. And along with LLMs generating like proposing plans, they can with a human in the loop, they can essentially come up with a model that can then be used as a model based critique within the LLM modular framework. LLMs can also be used to define problem specification with an end user. So there are multiple roles that LLMs can play in the LLM modular framework, but the bare bones generate test framework is LLMs guesses the candidate plans, and we have like an external verifier verify them, and we find that we find that for blocks world and logistics, again, we see a significant improvement, while with the mystery blocks world, this is also deceptive. We see an improvement, but not uh, that big of an improvement. So this is the bare bones version where we just have an external verified check for correctness of the solution, but there can be a bank of critiques where each critique checks for certain aspects of the plan. And there, so in order to sort of test this, we move to other benchmarks, which where we could essentially have like different set of critiques and prompt the LLM essentially check the LLM modular framework. So we have the travel planning benchmark where there are different types of constraints and that have to be adhered to, and LLMs by themselves are pretty bad at solving this benchmark. And we also have we also tested another benchmark called natural plan, which also has which can be considered like a scheduling benchmark. And we see that LLM modulo improves performance with guarantees on the travel planning and the natural plan benchmarks, which contain 3 different tasks. And the thing that we one of the things to consider is that the soundness of the LLM modular framework depends on the verifiers, while the completeness depends on the LLM's ability to come up with good candidate solutions. So in this case, like we've only run the LLM modular framework for like 15 rounds, and we could further there could be various other like diversification strategies and more rounds to that could improve the performance further. So along with LLMs proposing candidate plans, we also we can also have LLMs with the domain expert in the loop come up with like domain models that can then be used either with external planners or within the LLM modular framework itself. And we have a entire method to essentially construct the PTDL. Here we look at specifically classical planning problems which are represented in PTDL, and we essentially have steps where we construct the PTDL with the LLMs, we have the humans correct it, and then use that to either I use that resulting model either with external planners or within the LLM modular framework. So on the whole, we have seen that LLMs can play a variety of roles within the LLM modular framework as candidate plan generators, as as an approximate source for models, domain models, and they can in this way essentially the human intervention is minimized, where the human just has to intervene for the once per domain and for the problem, and then it's essentially like white planner. So that brings us to the end of the second part. So far we have looked at vanilla LLMs, but there's a new class of LLMs in the recent year or so, where they post-train LLMs further to output intermediate tokens before providing the solution. Vanilla LLMs, when given a prompt, just provide the solution, whereas these new class of models, when provided with the prompt, uh, uh, come up with a bunch of intermediate tokens and then the solution. So this was uh, uh, LLMs like absorb like every article, every single thing on the internet, but the idea was that they really encountered the processes behind these, and if we provide those processes, then that would that would help them better solve the problems. And this is essentially trying to bring chain of thought back into training. And but interestingly, the uh, uh, the post-training approaches where specifically DeepSeek R1 uses a post-training approach where it only it asks the LLM to generate intermediate tokens and the final solution, but it changes the model's parameters only based on the only based on the correctness of the final solution. So the idea there is that this would essentially improve the models this would essentially improve the performance of these models, and this can be thought of like bringing the LLM modular framework back into training, where we have external verifiers that verify the solutions, and we ask the LLMs to not only generate the solutions but the intermediate tokens, and then we change the model parameters based on what the external verifiers provide as the reward. So the thing that we wanted to see was whether these new class of models, as they were claimed to do better in multiple benchmarks, whether they are better than standard LLMs in plan. And what we found out was that especially on open preview, we found that on the mystery blocks full domain, we found a huge jump in terms of the overall accuracies, but they still do not have any guarantees on their outputs. So they still perform much better than the vanilla LLMs, but we still don't have any guarantees on their outputs. And we've also tested DeepSeek R1 on extended on PlanBench and extensions of PlanBench, where we had like a randomized mystery version of the logistics domain and a new domain called Sokoban, and we find that they like DeepSeek R1 performs pretty comparable with O1. So this tells us that these LRMs are much better plan candidate generators, but they still don't have guarantees on on their outputs. So we can actually put them within the LLM modular framework and have them interact with external verifiers, and that essentially will have with that we can actually improve the performance much further, and we see that with O1 we move like on a much harder block-fold data set within 7 iterations. We gain a significant we have a significant improvement in the performance, but this comes at a pretty high cost, as you can see. It's especially the OpenAI models, uh, uh, those models are pretty costly. So LLM modulo itself can be a cheaper alternative to such models, um, where we can essentially run for more than like 50 iterations with GPT-4o mini and for much less cost and still beat the performance. And other than O1, DeepSeek R1, even with DeepSeek R1, we find improvements in the performance for actually much less costs. So this sort of tells us that post-trained models are better than perform better than vanilla models, and they can, but they still don't have guarantees on their outputs, so they can be put in the LLM modulo framework for like to further boost the performance with guarantees on the outputs. Now. Although we see a significant difference in the performance between the post-train and the vanilla LLMs, it's the community has interpreted this as having the model like bringing chain of thought within training and having the model quote unquote reason through the problem and then come up with the solution. So it has uh, essentially they have attributed these performance improvements to like aha moments within the intermediate tokens, or claiming it as thoughts, or having like certain reasoning behaviors like backtracking or self-verification within these intermediate tokens. So like we have to consider two things when we're looking at such claims. One is that the like the post-training methods do not put any optimization pressure on these intermediate tokens. Like like GRPO essentially only changes the model's parameters based on the rewards of the solution. And the other thing is that these models are essentially vibe machines. So they do not, given that they don't have any guarantee on their outputs, it's not uh, clear, or it kind of raises suspicion whether these intermediate tokens have like end user semantics. So we sort of set out to like try to systematically evaluate whether these intermediate tokens have end user semantics. But the problem is that for models like let's say R1, they have these long long traces that go like on and on and on and on and on and on on and on and on and still going on. Okay, this is the last one, I guess. Yes, and on. So so it's really hard to formally evaluate these traces. So like taking inspiration from works that look at small scale experiments to talk about certain functional aspects of large models, we sort of looked at a more controlled setup where we evaluated models that are trained from scratch on formally verifiable traces and solutions. Here we looked at essentially like a maze navigation problem, and we had A-star search come up with the traces and the solution. So this setup is something that has been used in this work called Search Former, where they essentially train models with A-star search, but they do not quite look at the semantics of these intermediate tokens and see how they influence model performance. So the mumblings of this model looks something like this. This way we can cleanly evaluate the traces and the plan. So the goal here is to sort of look at whether whether the correctness of a generated solution correlates with the validity of the trace, and whether the trace correctness within the data set influences the model performance, and whether post-training methods like GRPO would induce any trace validity. So in order to measure in distribution, out of distribution performances, we came up we essentially generated problems using different maze generation algorithms, and that would essentially result in varied patterns within the mazes. And the first thing that we checked was whether the correctness of the generated solution correlates with the trace validity. And for that, what we did is we generated a data set of 500K mazes on a particular algorithm, here the Wilson algorithm, and we also trained separately a search format style model, which is a separate maze generation algorithm, and we tested it on the in and out of distribution problems. And what we find here is that the trace validity is not like a reliable predictor of plan accuracy. If that was the case, then all of these should have been 100%. But we do find that there is like high correlation within the Wilson models, and there's a more there's a lack of correlation within the search format style models. So we looked closer at these Wilson models where we trained we essentially trained models on tasks with like 100 to 3,500 tokens within the traces. This would essentially mean that these tokens essentially are A-star search tokens. So you can think of this as a measure of difficulty of the problem, and we essentially trained models on solution traces between 1,000 and 3,500 tokens, and we tested models on easier, harder, and in distribution held out data sets. And there we find that the correlation between there's like a deteriorating correlation between the trace validity and the plan accuracy as the difficulty increases. So this sort of tells us whether we have to even train with the correct traces. So what we essentially checked was whether what if we train the model with noisy traces and look at how the look at essentially the performance. So what we did is we took the training data and we have the normal models where we train them on the correct A-star traces, and from on that data set we essentially swapped just the traces within the data set and created this new data set called swap data set. And we trained the Wilson and SF style, we trained two other models with these swap data sets. And surprisingly, we find that both these models perform equally or even much better in out of distribution data sets, while the trace validity is consistently 0. And we also looked at varying the proportion in the while we were swapping the traces, as in here in with for these models the training data set essentially swapped all the traces, but we also looked at training models where we just swap like a proportion of the entire data set. And we find that there's like a very interesting like a U curve where with the uh, uh, with the completely correct trace data set, if we keep swapping, the performance reduces, but then again gradually it increases with 100% swapping. So this is just like training, like supervised fine tuning. But if we look at the post training methods, where as we know, it doesn't apply any optimization pressure on the intermediate tokens, we can actually boost the performance of these models much higher. And we see that in certain cases, even for the correct model, the model that is trained on the correct traces, we see a dip in the trace validity as we do GRQ. This shouldn't be surprising because essentially we are like GRQ doesn't look at the intermediate tokens while changing the model parameters. Um, and with the swap models, we can even with the swap models, we can actually boost performance much higher up, and the trace validity is consistently 0%. So this sort of tells us that like these results essentially put a fresh perspective on these intermediate tokens, questioning the like all the anthropomorphization of these intermediate tokens being reasoning traces. And it also shows that if performance is what is important, assuming that these tokens have like semantics is like end user semantics is not necessary. And the way to like probably think about these intermediate tokens would be more as like prompt augmentations, where like the idea, I mean, the task would essentially be try to find the right kind of prompt augmentation that would improve the model performance. And the important thing to note is that these augmentations need not be human interpretable. And there have been past works in like jailbreaking LLMs where you try to get like an adversarial prompt that is not human interpretable for the LLM to answer your question. And there are also more recent works that look at like that essentially use intermediate tokens from the latent space to improve the performance. So overall, in this dissertation, we look essentially at evaluating vanilla LLM planning capabilities in autonomous modes with prompt engineering techniques and within self-verification loops. We found that they perform poorly, but at the same time, they can be used within the LLM modular framework with external verifiers as and play multiple constructive roles that can support plan. And we also looked at the more recent class of models, which are post-trained on derivation traces, and we showed that while they're significantly better than the vanilla LLMs, they do not provide any guarantees on the outputs, and we can actually use these models as better candidate generators within the LLM modular framework. And we also looked at evidence that essentially says that these intermediate tokens that the models are generating are they do not have end user semantics, and we can actually essentially, if the performance is the objective, then we do not need to assume end user semantics for these intermediate tokens and still have equal or even sometimes better performance. So this sort of sums up the entire dissertation. I'd like to thank first my like this work has been possible because of the support of a whole bunch of people. First, to start with, I think I would like to thank Professor Rao. I think from that quote on his front door to every single interaction I've had with him, it has been truly life-changing. And I'd like to then thank my committee members for spending their valuable time and supporting me for this dissertation. And I've always believed that we can sort of control or we can sort of choose what we want to do, but we can't really control the people that we encounter. But I'm extremely lucky to have met and worked with like some of the best. I'd like to thank all my lab mates for keeping making my experience at the lab much better. To start off, I would actually like to thank my lab mate Sharath, who was pretty much my pretty much everything to me.
That could be bribing. You can't be.
And I'd also like to thank especially Kaya and Lynn for constantly keeping me on my toes and helping with everything. And I'd also like to thank my family and friends for their support throughout this time. And I've also been part of other works that's not in this dissertation, and I'm really happy to see that the work that I've done so far has had considerable impact on the community, and which I think that work has also fetched me PhD fellowship from IBM, and I'm thankful to them. And I've also been part of multiple tutorials from which some of these slides were taken from. And with the summary, I will end my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Karthik. So it's now open session. So committee members can ask questions anytime, but anybody in the audience have any questions, they can also ask. Yes, go ahead.
So like for the first thing that you discovered, right, with LLM and planning capabilities, like now at this stage, like how applicable is this idea that these LLMs are bad at planning with more real world domains like healthcare, right? Like, have you seen any body of work that came in from like people analyzing whether LLMs can plan heart surgeries or something like that? So
yeah, you should be very wary about if people are planning heart surgery.
yeah,
He can.
yes, sure.
Yeah, but I mean, either way, the idea is that there are no guarantees on the outputs, and even for something like stacking blocks, they're like you can't rely on them for stacking blocks, let alone heart surgeries. So I would think that either way have proper verifiers in them.
So I was going to the slide number 58, where you mentioned about using intermediate tokens for the LRM part of the presentation. So I was wondering whether these intermediate tokens can be counterproductive.
As in?
So in case if the intermediate tokens provide anything which is not logically correct for the planning, or any kind of incorrect traces in the intermediate steps.
Yeah, the evidence that I've shown is that even with incorrect traces, you can still come up with right solutions.
But isn't that for the case where you also train on incorrect traces? So the model learns just not to trust.
Even for the correct traces, when we post-train those models, we see cases where the validity of the trace dips, and there are significant number of instances where the post-trained model, correct model, actually provides the correct solutions with incorrect traces.
Right, but the question was, can bad traces lead to bad performance also?
Not necessarily.
And it seems to me if you train a model that depends on good traces.
Good traces, yeah.
Which was at the left hand of that
Right.
safe curve,
Right.
and then you give it bad traces.
Right. Yes.
Doesn't performance yet.
Yes, that would essentially give the call.
So it is learning to pay attention to those traces. Yeah, but we don't really understand what it's getting out of them because it can also do equally well ignoring those traces. But the traces need to be there, even though they're
Yeah.
Now, my question is, how about the length?
Right. The length.
Does that improve the performance?
Uh,
You're talking about mumbling, right?
What's the
Yeah,
optimal
mumbling,
length?
right?
Yeah. What's the optimal length of nonsense trace?
Yeah, the mumbling. You showed us mumbling, right?
Yeah. So I think from one of our analyses, we found that like the trace length, there is no like optimal trace length for which it gets correct. So it's even the trace length does not impact performance. Because the
In general, the longer the better, right?
no, that's not the case.
They pretend that they are thinking.
So that's also one of the one of the properties of intermediate tokens that is anthropomorphized, where they say that it's if the trace is longer, then it is thinking more, so it would essentially lead to the right solution.
And eventually it's overthinking it.
It's overthinking, and then there is
overthinking.
There's work by Vardhan that I think you're also probably involved, I forget, but where basically they take the same model that was trained on the Wilson traces and then show it mazes where there's no maze. That means it's an empty space, start and goal. So in principle, it's actually a much cheaper problem, much easier problem. They take forever to solve them, quote unquote, solve them. The point is, it's a memory effect. You're not solving, you're trying to see whether there is something in the memory that is close to this problem, essentially. And so thinking of intermediate traces as your futile effort to see if I can find something in the memory that I can overfit to this is probably an okay thing to do. But certainly lengths have nothing to do with complexity.
Yeah, but they try to let us believe, right? In your example, some people they say from 0 to 4 or 6 steps, the performance at the error, right? The performance improves, error rate decreases, but then you increase the length, the steps. I mean the reasonably steps, right? In your one of the examples, remember? Then the performance decreases.
That curve that
you know what I'm talking about, right? It's the 4 to 5.
It's a different curve.
5, 6.
Is that the one you're talking
No, not this
No,
one.
this one.
But I can find it for you later.
Lastly, the word continuation.
Last level concatenation. That is basically it's just showing that as the complexity.
Yeah, so don't worry. I have this.
Yeah.
Basically, people try to show us that your solution. They want us to believe that increase the steps and then performance can improve.
No.
But
It's very important to know who is the they there. It's not the LLMs.
The authors. Yeah, these authors.
Other questions? Okay, any questions for the open session from the committee members?
I have basically people think you also showed, right? They can do amazing things, right? They can do something. People are very impressed. So for the AGI believers, some people say they are already here already, okay? So for the AGI believers because so many people are using AI, they believe like, for the AGI believers, how would you talk to them? When they say, because you have done this, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
If they ask you,
Countless sessions.
yeah, they ask you like, okay, they are really like smart, okay? It's amazing they can do these things. That's number one. Number two, when you point out to these mistakes, they say, hey, humans also make mistakes. How are you going to, talk to them? Or you just give up and turn back toward them?
I think one good thing that came out of LLMs is the ability to, like, we are able to compress like the entire web data to something that is like readily accessible. But the way I see these models are like these giant like FAQs. But at some at least I would the way I would look at these models are they are like these like approximate retrieval machines, and if you're only looking at the cases where they are right and believing that they will always be right, then that's essentially something you should be.
So could you go back to slide 32? I didn't quite understand what you were saying. This PowerPoint.
Therefore critiquing. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I didn't understand what you're saying. It is harder to establish the poor quality of deeps and tacit knowledge tasks. Why would that make performance? I mean, why? How does that bear on this argument that self-critiquing works?
Right. So the idea there was essentially there were cases where they were like the claims that put forward that self-critiquing works looked at tasks like creative writing and said that oh, you club like an LLM generator and an LLM verifier, it is coming up with more creative more creative answers, and the fact that these such kind of
So that's a sort of a methodological error, probably.
Yeah.
That evaluation isn't objective.
Yeah.
I guess another question is, there's been recent work on taking the same transformer architecture but training it using diffusion techniques instead. Do you think that, so there are a couple of startups now in discrete diffusion. How many of those results do you think will carry over to the discrete diffusion versions?
I think
Is that a good thesis for someone in the room?
Yes.
I think so. Yeah.
I'm just about to say, why aren't we doing diffusion to my Slack?
Yeah, I think we would have to subject those models to the same some same studies that we're doing.
My last question was about, at the very end, you talk about this idea of viewing all this as augmentation, input augmentation. What I'm not sure what your prompt augmentation. Have you looked at DSPy at all? And this sort of is automated. I mean, they're presumably doing something like that.
So they're only looking at the like structure of the prompt.
Well, DSPy as a framework it does that. Yeah, but then they optimize the prompts.
Yeah,
so then seems to
they
involve
optimizing
the choice of in-context examples to use.
Right. So there are also like there are also works like auto COT like where they're trying to, like, given a set of examples, you're trying to optimize, you're trying to train a model to get like the best example out of it. So those at some level, I mean, those can be considered as frameworks for prompt augmentation, and but it's like it's harder to look like.
You turn into a question, how would you falsify the prompt augmentation hypothesis?
That's a good one. Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that, so.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Question was, how would you formalize the?
How would you falsify?
Falsify.
I mean, as a way of sharpening what the hypothesis really is.
The person you try to bribe,
Yeah, no, shut it.
he has a first.
Yeah, just unmute yourself and speak. Sharad.
Okay. Oh no, yeah. So maybe are you still trying to answer Dr. Dietrich's question, or should I go ahead and ask my question?
Go ahead.
Okay. So I had like few questions. Like so, the first one is a bit nitpicky in the sense of I didn't quite follow it. You were saying in your search formers that part, you were talking about traces and how they correlate to complexity. What were you exactly trying to do there?
Not complexity, but like essentially the correctness of the solution and
No. I know, but you
Yeah.
said in a passing statement that you generated traces using A-star search, and
Yeah.
they were somehow standing for the complexity of the problem.
Yeah. So in the length generalization experiments,
Right.
the one of the like the way to sort of like one of the ways we made like we can look at these 1 second, sorry. Yeah. In this the idea there is that we have the traces that are generated by A star, and the like we essentially have like we can look at the length of the A star trace as a
Right.
measure of the problem complexity,
Right.
and we looked at easier and harder test sets from that dimension.
My only concern there is usually A-star's trace is also a result of the heuristic. So how did you account for how the same heuristic might, affect different problems differently when you are measuring these kind of things, like easier, harder versus things like that?
Right. So we use like the Manhattan heuristic.
Right. But there might be problem instances where Manhattan would generate, better, like shorter traces than others, right?
Right.
Okay, that's just like a nitpicky thing. But the two real questions I had was one was what do you think is the reason for the U curve? I don't know if anybody already asked that.
Yeah. That's a big open question.
It's like a new
That's an open question.
Yeah, that's
It's the yeah. So one thing that I also did was perform GRPO on these models. Just these swap the 25, 50, 75% swap traces, and they you can actually see the U like close up in terms of the plan validity. So this could be like an artifact of what, and these are just like a one seed of a swap, like one kind of a swapping, and it could be an artifact of that. So you can actually I'm also trying to think out as to why that U curve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a hypothesis. This is, by the way, this is less than 10 days old, right? This is like this is as bleeding edge as it gets.
Still the
It just got submitted to the MLR. But anyway, so I think my hypothesis basically is that they try to overfit to the traces in the training data, which is why they can get used to swap traces or correct traces. But when you start mixing them, the overfitting, you have to actually it basically the ability to fit becomes harder because they're like different kinds of traces mixed in. So that's what I actually expected, that completely wrong traces, completely right traces will work, and in between it will dip. So I was very happy to see the U curve, because I think it basically just shows that what actually matters is being consistent in the traces. Use any consistent pattern in the traces, you're more likely to let the overfitting happen than if you keep changing them. I think there was a version where, actually a very older Anthropic version where or something, where they actually said dot, dot, dot. That's it. Everything is dot, dot, dot. And that also helps. It turns out. It doesn't help as much as this, but so yeah, that's a way of thinking. Who asked that? I don't know.
Sure.
Yeah, makes sense. That makes complete sense. One more question is, this is more like, blue sky-ish thing. Where do you think benchmarks for planning should go? Because I think we've come full circle and we're starting to see papers where methods are being fine-tuned on the plan bench data set, and they are now over-claiming about planning capabilities. So do you have, any like
Especially with
arguments for that?
right, with the post-training methods, the fact that we're able to uh, like rely on try to generate like more synthetic problems and train on them, that yeah, the impact of that is going to definitely reflect on planning benchmarks, and it like the diagonalization tests would definitely be much harder in the future, given that the moment uh, there is a benchmark that, like, especially with respect to like classical planning sort of benchmarks, given that they can again be put they can be put back into training, it will, my sense is, it will be harder for us to sort of come up with more diagonalization tests like the mystery blocks world sorts of problem.
Okay.
But my sense is that given that currently these models are still being trained on essentially, given that they're still being trained on language that we understand, we can have like versions of mystery blocks world that we can we should essentially move forward. At least my sense is we should move forward within in that dimension where we find different sort of obfuscations and see how that.
So just to understand, you're more in favor of like held out domains itself, and like there are certain domains that's not going to get revealed at all.
Yes.
Okay.
Held out domains, and also like
different kinds of obfuscations and yeah. Okay. Oh yeah, that's all those are all the questions there. Yeah.
Any other questions for the public session? Going once, going twice. Okay, then we will end the public session. You all get to go. Come and talk to me about the operation plans. I will tell you more about it. Actually, you can also get a wedding plan for your wedding. Just don't get married with it. That's and you have to end the recording, and then.
I understand. But thank you so much for